at a critical moment. My name is Portia Fillard. I have the pleasure as the community engagement consultant with Every Voice, Every Vote. Hear a little bit more from me later. But at this moment, I would like to invite the leader of this house, Dr. Pastor Corey Johnson. Thank you so much for the Germantown Seventh-day Adventist Church for hosting us. Biasly, I am a member. So I'm very excited to be here and have my church host this. So Pastor Johnson, I would like to invite you up to share a few words and open us up in prayer.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Germantown Church, we're just so grateful to be able to host such an important gathering. The word says that our people perish for a lack of knowledge. It is important that we are able to come together and gain better understanding on the issues that we face every day. And so I'm just grateful that we are able to support in this way and offer this space for this critical conversation that should help us be more knowledgeable about issues that impact our community. God, let's pray tonight. God, we just thank you for the ability to learn more, the ability to engage in dialogue and in conversation, and to leave with a perspective that empowers us to be knowledgeable on the issues. Bless our time together is my prayer in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you so much. And so at this time, I am going to invite my boss, Sean Mooring, to share some opening remarks.
Thank you. And Portia likes to pretend like I'm her boss, but we know we all do what she tells us to do, and that's how we keep ourselves out of trouble. But thank you all for coming out tonight and being a part of this. I'm going to spend a little bit of time just framing what Every Voice, Every Vote is, and really wanted to start by acknowledging, this space, and thank you to Pastor Corey for having us out tonight. It's really important as we developed Every Voice, Every Vote. It was very intentional. Lenfest Institute for Journalism, right, is who we are. But this initiative is the first initiative where we're actually funding community organizations as well, and that is for the role of trusted messenger that they play in many communities. Even where there may be a breakdown in the relationship with the press, we know that there are key institutions throughout the city that people go to where they are seeking clearer understanding on issues or even how to vote or where to go to get the information. Again, my name is Sean Mooring. I'm the head of Philadelphia programs at Lenfest Institute, and I'm very glad to be working with such a great team. Portia as our community consultant, Jared Council over here is our media connection and also program manager. And what is Every Voice, Every Vote? It is an initiative that we launched back in 23 ahead of the municipal race where we elected our 100th mayor. And there was just, a flood of, I think there were 14 candidates or something like that. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we did through Every Voice, Every Vote was to make sure that we stayed focused on the issues that mattered. And so we did some public opinion polling through that effort. And those responses that we got back through the public opinion poll focused on issues of public safety, education, housing, and then once we got those results and lined them up with the mayor's key priorities, they were very much in sync. And so what we do is we continue to focus on those issues. We have over 70 partners on the media and community side that, have used some of the data that we got back to, identify the issues. And so they continue to report on those issues, and we continue to keep the focus on those things. One of the things that, as we were coming to the end of our first cycle of Every Voice, Every Vote, folks said, if you're really serious about this, then you'll continue to keep this going beyond the election cycles. And that's what we were very intentional about doing and making sure that we continue to keep a focus on those key issues that everyone, as we've gone through this process of polling, have told us that that's what was particularly informative to them and what they wanted to make sure that we are building a civic infrastructure that will last beyond a grant cycle or an election period. And so how do we do this work? We engage media partners, community partners, but we also have what we call social media ambassadors, and those are content creators that help to amplify the message, whether that is, amplifying a report, continuing with the surveys and engaging people about what it is that they see as solutions to some of the issues that have been raised. And we have been partnering with an evaluation firm called SSRS. And so we've done a series we did an initial survey of the community where we got about 2,000 respondents, where we did the initial piece. And then we followed that up in the next cycle with focus groups, as well as an online town hall where we took the results from those focus groups, had those online, and invited people to go weigh in and see where they identified with some of the solutions that were posed through the focus groups, add additional comments, and I think we had about 350 people participate in that engagement as well. But it allowed us then to frame, and you'll see some of the questions and the way that we frame even our community conversations are based in that research. They're based in the voice of the people that we've engaged around this process. And so it's really all about how do we continue to engage community, keep community focused front and foremost in all that we do as we build a infrastructure that will be lasting in Philadelphia beyond any municipal election. So with that, I'm going to allow Portia to come back up and introduce our panel and get us ready for this evening.
Thank you so much, Sean. I hope this is the last time I have to be in front of you all, not because I don't want to, but I want to get the conversation started. So one of the things that Sean shared is that, first of all, there's a way that we're able to do this. Our lead sponsors, William Penn Foundation, of course, the LenFest Institute, Comcast, Knight Foundation, and Philadelphia Health Partnership. So with their support and funding, this is why we are able to continue the work that we're able to do. So definitely have to shout out our sponsors. And so as Sean shared, when we made the decision to move into these community conversations, it was from the understanding that the conversation had to continue. One of the things that we really learned from our first grant cycle was that, again, there's a disconnect from how people understand how government operates. And so having the data that we had and understanding what issues were important, we wanted to make sure we created space for people to openly have dialogue, not just understanding how government impacts their key issues, but also how they can be advocates and what they can do to lean into to advocate for the changes and things that they want to see pushed forward. And so what I'm going to fast forward to is share some of the data that we gathered from the research that we conducted via the focus groups and our community polling. So our objectives, again, we built upon the original surveys that we conducted, where we learned that Philadelphians were most focused on public safety, sustainability, education, and economic development. But this particular time, we focused on these three. So as Sean shared, we started with focus groups, and then we had a community pulse poll where we opened that up to using digital platforms to engage people in conversations. Again, how they felt the city was doing as it relates to these issues, what were the solutions that they wanted to see, and any additional concerns that they wanted to share. So again, just some key numbers so you can have an understanding of who we spoke with regarding the focus groups and the level of participation that we received as it relates to the issues. And of course, tonight, we are most focused on the data that we received and information that we gathered from the questions around education. Priorities, when we talked to those 214 people online, improved teacher pay, more behavioral mental health services, improving condition of school buildings, increased school funding, teaching life skills and civics. Those were the top 6, but I wanted to focus on the top 5, which will really inform how we have tonight's conversations, because that's the crossroads we find ourselves in right now, right? We find ourselves at seeing that we are moving to a quote-unquote solution of school closures, and understanding context of how we got here, and of course what we can do and advocate to hopefully maybe alter or change or have clarity around what those decisions look like. We're in the Northwest, so we wanted to highlight what Northwest spoke about when they talked about top priorities. And so just generally overall, the first priority was, the top 3 priorities when we talked to people who represented the Northwest was public safety, addressing the root causes of crime, reducing litter, and improving teacher pay. So again, this is an area that one of the top priorities was absolutely talking about investing in education, particularly as it looks at how we pay our teachers. And then the closest neighborhooding area is North Philadelphia. And again, just a reminder that people and our neighbors and our communities prioritize different things based on where we live. And so when we talk to people in North Philadelphia, top priorities were reduce litter, again, address root causes of crime, and more youth programming. So again, we are really intentional in our data to making sure that we are talking to people and meeting them where they are and how they view what is important to them. So when we talked about our findings on education holistically, we assessed some successes, the concerns, and also asking people what were their most recognized initiatives from this administration, and then their ideas. And again, that's the fuller conversation that we're going to have today, and really diving into what are some solutions-oriented perspectives and actions that we can take when we think about investing and supporting our public school education system. And again, just re-emphasizing and sharing the numbers that speak to when we talk about education, what are the specific priorities from Philadelphians and how they feel what should be prioritized when we're addressing the concerns that they have regarding public education. Another map that shares specifically the top 3 education priorities by neighborhood. We're in the Northwest, so those top 3 priorities were improve teacher pay and staffing, increase school funding, more behavioral and mental health services, and improve conditions of school buildings. And then again, these are just some quotes that we received from our participants when we talked about what it looks like to increase funding for schools or how they felt about things of that nature. And this is public information, so we're happy to share this with you all. I don't want to belabor the moment by reading, but again, happy to share this information out. But again, just want to remind you that we are always about grounding our conversations in data and real conversations, because our goal is solutions, and that's always our focus. Again, more quotes around better school building conditions, and how people just related that to feeling safe, feeling valued, and students and their environment being prioritized in healthy and safe conditions. Awesome. So without further ado, we are going to invite our panel. I am very thrilled to introduce our moderator, Ms. Shania Bennett, who is from the Mayor's Office of Youth Engagement. So Shania, I'm going to invite you up first. We'll invite our panelists, and we will have our panelists introduce themselves.
I think this one is on too.
Sometimes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shania Bennett. I'm director of the Mayor's Office of Youth Engagement, and I'm excited to get the conversation going. Should I call up the other panelists? Okay, please, all the panelists, I don't know how to pronounce everyone's name, so please just come. Please. really quickly, if everyone could just, go in a row and introduce themselves, and we'll get the conversation going. Start with you.
Good evening. Hello? Can you hear me? I don't know. Can you hear me good? Yeah. Good evening, everybody. My name is Councilman Isaiah Thomas. I'm a council person at large, represent the entire city of Philadelphia. I'm also the chair of the Education Committee on City Council, and I'm excited to have this conversation this evening.
Hey, good evening. Nope, can't tell. No, you can't. Good evening, everybody. There we go. My name is Tamir Harper. I have the great honor of being the incoming executive director of Philly for Great Public Schools, a new C4 that's tasked with advocating for young people here in the city of Philadelphia, but most importantly, I'm a Southwest Philly native, went through the good, bad, and ugly of the school district of Philadelphia, and currently a doctoral student researching the current effects that's happening across the country.
I think this is on. Yeah. So good evening, everyone. My name is Inella Ray. I'm the Director of Parent Advocacy and Engagement at Children First. In short, we work to really improve the life and the life chances of the region's children.
Hello. Okay. Hi, my name's not. Oh, mine's not good either. Okay, good. Wait. Yeah. Hi, my name is Naya Marrero. I'm a former alumni of Germantown High School. I also am executive director of Coalition for Black Trans Economic Liberation. We work to get reparations and services to Black trans people in Philadelphia and the tri-state area.
And I'm Carly Citron. I am the bureau chief and reporter at Chalkbeat Philadelphia. We're a hyperlocal news nonprofit that covers education and school issues in the city. And I am realizing I think I'm the only one that didn't bring notes as a reporter. Oh, here we go. All right, we're good.
Oh, hello? You can't tell.
Yeah.
You still can't hear nothing. It's on, but you can't hear me.
Can we turn this one on? Is that one working?
Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
This one? You can hear on this one?
Okay. All right, let's get. All right, so let's just hop right into the conversation. So, at a crossroads, school closures, community priorities, and the future of Philadelphia's neighborhood schools, Philadelphia's public education system is navigating a period of significant transition. As enrollment patterns shift, facilities age, and financial pressures persist, the school district of Philadelphia is once again considering school closures and consolidation strategies more than a decade after the 2012-2013 closures reshaped neighborhoods across the city. At the same time, Every Voice, Every Vote polling and focus group research revealed that residents consistently identify increased funding, improve teacher pay and retention, modernize and safe school facilities, expand on mental health resources, stronger after-school program, and life skills and workforce preparation as priorities. Many of the challenges cited as drivers of consolidation, underutilized buildings, staffing, instability, aging infrastructure, and resource constraints are the very issues residents believe should be addressed through deeper investment. Fair funding distribution and long-term planning for Philadelphia school closures are not separate from funding equity, teacher support, or facilities modernized. They are connected to them. The community conversation brings these realities into a focus to whether consolidation is a solution to the problems residents identified, a symptom of unresolved funding inequities, or a signal that structural reforms must go further. All right, so that wasn't a question. That was just a statement. All right, So yeah, I laid it out. All right, I was waiting for the question, but I didn't see it. Okay, so here's the actual question. Philadelphia's public education system is again facing conversation about school closures. From your perspective, what is the most important thing Philadelphia should understand about why we are at this crossroads right now? And this question is for Inella and Councilman Thomas and Carly.
All right, I'll take it then. So I think it's really important to start from really the chronic underfunding the school district and other districts across the Commonwealth have had to weather. And so in 2023, a lawsuit, I'm competing with the baby. So a lawsuit happened, and that lawsuit confirmed that the ways in which we fund our schools are unconstitutional. And so Harrisburg had to get to work. And what that meant was that the school district of Philadelphia was $1.25 billion underfunded. And so when we think about that large number, Harrisburg was like, we can't actually close that in 1 year. So they've been working incrementally to close that gap. So the state has been working on that, and they have put a 22% down payment on that. So it's about $274 million that they put into that underfunding, which means if you're doing the math, that's about $978 million underfunding, right? So everybody with me with that. $978 million we're underfunded right now. On top of that, we have close to a 350 structural deficit, separate from that other funding. Structural deficit is coming from the ARPA funds that are now pretty much have vanished. So ARPA funds was the American Rescue Plan. So we're really at a crossroads because we got school closures that were announced, right? Which is separate from the structural deficit. And then how many of you heard from the mayor yesterday about the amendment to the rideshare tax? So that stands to generate $48 million, which is fantastic, but we have to do more. And the more is gonna come from now, city council, so.
Ooh.
Before the city council part, I was thoroughly impressed, right? I was like, wow. You know your numbers.
I don't know. And I don't blame the baby. Cry. It's all good. I got children too. As far as the history, just to provide some context on those numbers that were just communicated, everyone knows that the responsibility of education it falls on the state. That's what the U.S. Constitution said, which means that the bulk of the funding should come from the state. So putting all those numbers together right now, if we were to fund the mayor's budget as is, the city, with all of the taxes, real estate taxes, all of the revenue we put up, we would be at $2 billion, right, to the district. The state would be at 2.1. So I understand what you're saying with city council. I definitely understand, I comprehend.
Has a reserves right now too, right?
The city has reserves, but your issue is not one-time funding. Your issue is that you need structural funding. So if we were to say, okay, we have a $1 billion reserve and we anticipate a $100 million deficit, we'll put up the $100 million. That only fixes the problem for this year. And then what happens is every year we have to go back to the drawing board and figure out where do we get this extra money that's needed. And so I agree with you with the history. We got to this point because of the Corbett administration. I'll say it and say it often, right? The Corbett administration chose to balance the budget of the Commonwealth during the recession on education, and we're still suffering from that decision. I just think it's very difficult for us to continue to ask the city to put up historic amounts of money to be able to close the funding gap that the Commonwealth is not. And so when you look at what we've done it every year. I'm not saying that I'm for or against this.
City council has not increased school funding every year.
Every single year we have. Every year we
You have not increased it. Last year the millage increase was increased?
Yes, every year. Every single year.
To what amount?
Every single year since I've been in city.
No, the last millage increase was increased in 24. The mayor, yes. The only person who voted against the budget last year was Majority Leader Kendra Brooks. So we did not increase funding.
I'm not gonna go back and forth.
Yeah, I'm glad.
I know what I voted for. I'm 100% sure that every single year we put more money into schools than a year before. The millage funding was specifically for extended day-based initiatives. The millage funding is only a small percentage. So what happens is that 56% of real estate dollars go to the school district of Philadelphia. So as we get new housing roll off of the 10-year tax abatement, we're naturally putting up more money. So I didn't say that the millage went up. I said the city puts up more money every year. So we're doing that through real estate taxes. We're doing that through a grant directly from the city, which in this mayor's budget is about $250 million. And the proposed number of $2 billion is a historic amount, and that's before the tax. So we're already, every single year since I've been in city council, put up more money than the year before, and that naturally happens whether we go into the millage or not, because we're peeling off more money from real estate taxes. So anybody who owns their home, did your real estate taxes go up? Yeah. Mine did. So if you own your home and your real estate taxes went up, that means that we're giving more money to the school district, even though we didn't raise the percentage of your tax. What happened was the value of your house went up. So as the value of your house goes up and you pay more in taxes, we naturally put up more money for the school district of Philadelphia. Anybody get ticket on Broad Street or Roosevelt Boulevard? A percentage of PPA money goes to the school district of Philadelphia. Under Rich Lazer's leadership, the PPA, still not paying their fair share for the record, has put up more money than what the PPA has in recent history. So I want to be very clear. The city of Philadelphia is putting up more money than what we ever have in the history of the city. And we have done so every year since I've been in city council. I never said it was enough. I never said I'm for or against the tax. But that's what we have done. The problem exists because of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth needs to step up and pay their fair share.
To ask a question who's the most impacted, as you know, as a homeowner in Philadelphia and Southwest, and as the most impacted, like someone who went to school and experienced the issues with funding. How is giving a city, especially when we're talking about government and then the people, full of functioning illiterate people, a bunch of money, actually going to help the most impacted when the conversations, the comprehension, and the empathy that is needed to allocate those funds in ways that actually impact the people and not just like throwing numbers at a functionally illiterate city? Like, how does the money actually come back to the people? How is it being used? How is that beneficial? And it's sort of rhetorical, but like something to think about is like, what does that mean? I watched those city council meetings. I went to school with some of the people who are in city council, and I know they can't read. So it's like, and this is me being transparent, like, I'm a functioning person who went to Germantown High School, who I did not get the education that when I moved to New York, I noticed the most impacted in the poorest communities in New York City have better education systems than us. And I know why, and I know all those things, and you know our mayor says that, but I just want to know, like, what is the numbers and the money actually doing on a impact level? Where we can say, like, constantly, we're doing better and we're giving more money, but like, where is it going to where there are people who can't function actually in leadership, and then there are people who can't function on the ground who are the most impacted, who aren't getting their needs met because they don't have the comprehensive skills to do that. That was just like a question or a thought. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Can you get my heard?
Also be mindful of great conversation. Right? We do have goals.
Yeah.
So I just want to assess, right? Is this a conversation that we can have post, or is this something that we want to
Okay. That's fine.
We could address it right now. I'm good. So first and foremost, I can't speak to anybody else on city council, so I don't know about that part. I know for me, I'm an honor roll student, graduated from Frankfurt High School, honor roll all my life, went to college on a scholarship, former teacher, majored in education. Education is a real priority to me. And so when I speak specifically to what we're looking at as it relates to current education funding, again, we have a lot of work to do, but if you look at the numbers and the facts and where we are, we've seen a significant improvement in attendance rate. The only thing that hurt the attendance rate was the SEPTA strike at the beginning of the year. Philadelphia School District is the fastest growing school district as it relates to academic progress out of any major city in the entire country. And the conversation that we're having right now around facilities is one that we essentially have to have because of irresponsible decisions that's made before we got to this point right here. I'm very proud of the fact that we're actually having this conversation because I've been pushing and forcing this for some time because we understand that we have underutilized buildings, but more importantly, we have teachers, students, and people we care about on a consistent basis going into buildings that's filled with mold and asbestos. So the dollars that we're talking about right now as it relates to the school district of Philadelphia, this isn't to train young people on AI. This isn't to put us in a position to get new technology. This isn't to put us in a position to get the latest, greatest things that our young people need to compete. This conversation is about keeping the lights on in the future. That's what this conversation is about. It's about avoiding staff layoffs and things of that capacity. Now, the reality is that the way government works, I'm not the superintendent. So I'm not necessarily the person who's responsible for how many facilitators we have as it relates to classroom size, curriculum-based issues, and things of that capacity. But what I do is I meet with the school district on a monthly basis as the chair of the education committee, and we meet with the school district on a quarterly basis, specifically with the CFO, to assess where we are financially and what we need to do in the future. So based on my position as a legislator, most of the things I know is based on lived experiences and me just caring about education, but technically it's not our job to understand the nuances of the school district. I just care, and I make sure that I learn it because my children are there, the young people I coach are there. If you don't know me, I do a free camp every summer. I service 200 young people for free, and that's my mirror, that's my reflection. So when I look at those young people and those families, that's how I know whether or not we're doing a good job, and that's why I always say we still got more work to do because the young people I work with on a consistent basis, they're definitely struggling right now. So I hope I answered your question.
If I can also just for a second, situate us, zoom us out a little bit and situate us, because I think that the funding portion of it is a core part of how we got here and why we're here. But I also want us to recognize that this is not a Philly-only situation, right? There are closures happening in Denver, there are closures happening in Memphis, there are closures, happening all across the country right now. And partially, that is because we are facing significant enrollment declines in our public schools, right? I think over the past decade, the Philadelphia public school system has lost something like 17,000 students. And so we're sort of in this position of where we have declining enrollments. Partially that's because of declining birth rates overall, but also the rise of charter schools and cyber charter schools and just school choice policies in general. So the situation we're kind of finding ourselves in is we've got a lot of big old buildings that cost a lot of money to upkeep, to keep the lights on, to keep clean, and a lot of them are half empty. Whereas some, especially in the Northeast, are bursting at the seams. So we have a school district building and facility-wise that is not shaped the same way that our city really needs if you look at where, young people are arranged throughout the city. And so I think it's a really hard, complicated, nuanced question that we're being faced with right now. And, as a reporter, I'm not here to say whether or not closures are the solution, but I do think we have to look at the fact that, we've got a problem that is not working for the people who are currently in our buildings. And so I'd be interested to hear, as throughout the rest of this conversation, both how we got here and where we're going forward.
Thank you. So in the Every Voice, Every Vote polling, 72% of residents said increasing public school funding, should be a top priority, and many participants emphasized the need for fair distribution of funds and stronger state investment. How much of today's closure conversation is fundamentally about funding, and what funding solutions should be part of the conversation moving forward? And this is for Councilman Thomas and Nally and Carly again.
Yeah, I think a big part of the conversation about closures is not actually about today's dollars. When we reference what happened in 2013, we were more in a crisis as it relates to where we were fiscally. We're having this conversation about the funding and where we are right now, but we're not at the same level of crisis that we were in 2013. So that gives us a couple different options. Number one, we can have a conversation about things like not closing any of our comprehensive neighborhood high schools, right? So whether you like the plan or you don't like the plan, my first compliment was when we did this in 2013, one of the lessons that we learned was closing schools like Germantown High School, closing schools like Bach High School, that really had an impact on the neighborhood that we couldn't necessarily anticipate. So when we revisit the conversation this time around, the fact that those things are not even a part of the conversation, to me, that's a start. That means that we're headed in the right direction. Now, clearly, there are a lot of things that I disagree with, and I've publicly said a lot of those things. And then there were things we have more questions about. But what we're doing right now, and I'm so happy that the conversation is happening because I've been asking for it for 3 years since I've been in chair of the education committee, is we're trying to think about what the future of public education look like in the city of Philadelphia. And we're at a crossroad. If you talk to Robin Cooper, who runs our principals union, Robin will tell you that
when we had this conversation in the past, the focal point was smaller schools, downsized classrooms. Now, over a decade later, we're trying to say big, comprehensive schools, right? So it's very confusing as it relates to where we were and what the objective was. We asked folks to do things, and they did the things that we asked them to do, and now we're telling them that the things we asked them to do are not necessarily good enough, and we want to move in a different direction. That conflicting message is a big part of the problem that we're having as it relates to the facilities conversation right now, but know that the conversation is not necessarily a bad one. When we started this conversation during the Height administration, the number was over $6 billion. The conversation today is around $3 billion, which of course is a lot of money. But again, because we're in this unique situation, we're not pressed to make the decision tomorrow. Let's be clear, I shouldn't say we are not pressed. The school board, because I technically don't have a say. The only people who have an actual vote in this is the school board. They are the ones who can vote on whether or not schools are closed or what gets consolidated. What we do have a vote on is how much money we give to schools. So we're always stuck between this rock and a hard place because no one wants to take money away from schools, but at the same time, we can't just reward folks for voting against things that we know are in the best or that are not in the best interest of our community. So we're in a very unique position. It's partly driven by money, but it's mostly driven by, again, how decapitated our school buildings are and how we have these buildings as it relates to large schools that are severely under-enrolled. We have to figure out what the solution is. I'm not saying closing schools is the answer, but as it was stated earlier, it's a unique problem to have.
You want to? Yeah, I'm gonna jump in, but you want to use this one?
The mics ain't working. Nope.
Oh, so the main part of the question I understood was that, is this really a funding issue? Is that right? I don't think today's the facilities master plan is not about finance, right? Because Research for Action released a report focused on Chicago and even threw in some Philadelphia. You only save about $1 million each time you close a school building a year. That's not going to address our $300 million deficit. I think, as the council member said, it is a problem that should have been addressed. We have a problem of people are not having kids at a higher rate, but it's also an investment of Philadelphia issue. People do not want to move, live, and build families in the city of first class. So until we start to invest in everything else, from housing and not raising real estate taxes respectfully, the first-time home buyer, you kind of made me broke.
We haven't raised them. We said your property value.
Yeah, y'all did a property value assessment after not doing it for a few years during COVID. But you ain't the mayor. I ain't mad at you. You ain't the mayor. So we'll deal with the two administrations that decided to say, oh, we're not going to slowly increase. So we have a fundamental problem of just, do people actually want to build families in this city? We can't say it is due to brick and mortar charter schools, because if you see the rate of brick and mortar charter schools, it's actually about the same, and it has not grown many over the years. We can talk differently about cyber charters. The thing is, we don't have an investment in the city to make people want to stay and raise families and then send their kids to the 8th largest school district in the country that's not really educating students nor families, because half of the time our kids don't have algebra, but in order to get into masterman, you need algebra. You got to know language. Yep. We don't teach language in our comprehensive neighborhood elementary and middle school. So this is a larger ecosystem where I think we have to stop just talking about education and talk about the city as a whole and how do we invest, and that will actually fund and stabilize public education.
Agreed. Thank you. It's on? All right, cool. So I actually respectfully disagree with some of my panelists about school closures not having to do with the root cause of underfunding. And I do agree with you, Tamir, that like there's well, you said that there's like, it's not a finance issue because of the cost savings relative to like closing schools.
But that is not a financial, that there has not been a disinvestment. There could be a disinvestment in saying closing schools aren't going to address that investment issue.
Yeah, so you're saying that because school closures are on the table, there's not going to be cost savings as a result of closing those
The
schools.
superintendent could not answer the board member question when he asked, how much money will you save when you close these schools?
Right. All right, I just want to make sure, like, the point.
cannot answer that question.
I agree with that, but what I'm saying that the root cause of how we get to a place where we have to close schools is because of decades of underfunding, because when you have decades of underfunding, that means then maintenance that was supposed to be on that school is now deferred.
No disagreement.
Okay, that was like the more so the point that I was trying to make. I do want to take stock of the fact that we are currently in budget season, which means that Harrisburg is making their budget as well as City Council. So the mayor just proposed her budget. So if you're really interested in this to see how City Council responds to this, April 22nd is when the school board will be called to the carpet by City Council and made to ask questions. So I encourage you to go see that in person, or you can go online to see how, one, the district is answering these questions around both school closures as well as underfunding, but you have the ability to influence your legislators, right? We have some staffers in the room also who are represented here. So none of these things are fixed, and if you don't know who they are some, so just make sure you talk to people. The fact of the matter here that I think is really important is that right now the mayor's proposing this rideshare tax. I'm not debating the merits of the tax, but the tax is not enough in itself. And I agree that when we're thinking about structural deficits, we shouldn't just be pulling from reserves as the answer. But I think we're in a very, very precarious state. And so when you have $1 billion in reserves and you need to make sure we don't sustain any cuts, I think you can touch on a rainy day fund. And so that's a more argument that I think council has to decide, but I actually think it is political malpractice not to move funds from $1 billion of reserves to help save kids.
Yeah, that's okay. I just wanted to add something as the most impacted that I heard. I'm really literally using the words as the most impacted because my school was closed. I was not able to get an actual education because of these school closings. My mother went broke paying for suit jackets for us to go to Germantown, being promised that our school would stay open if we bought the suit jackets and we paid for everything that we needed and if we behaved properly and we stopped fighting on Germantown Avenue. We were promised that we would have our historical school as somebody who's 4 generations from Germantown in Germantown High School. I want to address the things that people said about there's not an investment in the city. There's these different things happening where I do have to say that it is not just a financial issue because when the schools were closed, we lost institutions. Germantown provided childcare for so many young women in my neighborhood who happen to be in 9th grade and have children. When we talk about access, we talk about money, but not how it is being allocated. The 4th floor being shut down in our school, talking about those issues of sustainability with the building that should have been addressed when I was 15, I'm 30 years old. And that is a serious issue that I'm growing up watching my friends die from preventable diseases, from the sexual and social violence that happened because you guys did not fix the 4th floor. Not you guys specifically, but talking about the district since it's recorded. Like you didn't fix that 4th floor and now the sexual, social violence that was incurred by the people there kept them from having children. There are many people who watched their friends and loved ones pass away. They did not have children. They did not invest into the city. They did not go forth to the jobs that they needed. I watched students be undereducated within the school and did not come back to the city because they realized that they were, again, functionally illiterate. And then they paid $40,000 to go to college and then had to go back home or go back to an even poorer city to try to make money because now the city is full of people who have college degrees who aren't from here and who did not go to the public schools here. So I think that when we talk about this money, again, we have to talk about allocation. So when we say like, okay, you can give the school district billions of dollars, millions of dollars, but if that's going to line people's pockets, if that's going towards certain schools, if that's not going to keep in the sanctity and the empathy for the people who live in the communities and their children, because those children now are my friends' children. So I'm watching, again, those people who do not have the resources have to grow up without those resources for their children, and their children are now having children, and they won't invest. It'll never be an investment into a city that never invested in them and never proved itself to keep the promises in which it made financially. That's all.
And I think that's a perfect segue into the question I'm going to ask. Philadelphia closed 23 schools in 2012 to 2018. 13. Looking back more than a decade later, what do we now understand about the impact these closures had on students, educators, and neighborhoods? Tamir and Carly.
I have to make sure I'm go. Okay. The biggest thing that I noticed, because I got blessed to be somewhat radicalized and aware while this was happening. Me leaving Germantown was not because I was just some stupid kid or because I was rebellious. It was because I was in honors classes, every honors class. I went to Lingelbach Elementary, I went to Henry, and I had a great education. And then I went to Germantown, and in all of my AP classes, every single student was functionally illiterate, and I was not getting an education. I was being used as a token for my scores to try to keep it open, and I know this was for a fact. I realized that education, whether it's self-taught or taught by an institution, is life or death. I have watched people pass away from the fact that Germantown has been closed. I have watched people go insane. I have watched people be harmed. I have watched the escalation of violence when you take kids out of rivaling schools and you put them into one building randomly in the middle of the year. Despite the fact that I left school, I actually know what it means to say, you will miss not having a high school reunion. You will miss not having a prom. You will miss never seeing the people that you got socialized with ever again because of decisions of adults who, now that I'm an adult and able to make those decisions, had no care for our existence back then and to this day, to where we are currently suffering right now. One of the other things that I really, really realize is that though we talk about money and the physical infrastructures of these places, even if the physical infrastructures were horrible, I watched Germantown. I'm speaking on Germantown specifically because it's such a community school. I watched Germantown from my grandmother's generation offer trade. I watched Germantown from my mother's generation offer at least a substantial education. By the time my aunts went there, who are now 40-something, they were known for fights, violence, and somebody getting hung without any justice in the auditorium. And I'm speaking so very frankly because this is what's happening to your children. This is what they're witnessing. I witnessed the sexual, social, and weaponized, militarized violence be used against us more than any education we ever had. I know people who know police officers that we were pat down names more than they know algebra, as you said earlier, that they need to function. And these are life and death things that we are not acknowledging as a life and death situation. We're talking about buildings and money that are going to help house a bunch of yuppies, because I live on 47th and Springfield, and the high school around for me is just full of a bunch of gentrifiers who pay way too much money to rent homes in a neighborhood that needs education. And that is one of the biggest things that I don't think that we're looking at, the 15-year impact of why the city looks the way it does, because we took a bunch of kids who actively told you. We went out and protested. We went out and said something. We watched the criminalization of the teenager happen during these school closings, and all of the anger and violence that happened because of it happened. And we're going to watch it happen again with half of the resources that we had before. And I think that's a serious issue, and it should be looked at.
So, this one definitely on. So, I'm going to try to zoom in on a question of understand about the impact those closures had on students. I think we saw students have to leave their safety net, their generational school, and go to a school that they may not know about. We understand that if you go from one side of the block to the next side, if you go from 50th to 47th, you may be in a different neighborhood or in a gang territory that don't like 47th Street compared to 50th Street. We understand that, and Councilmember Kendra Brooks said at one point that she believes that the 2012-2013 school closures increased youth gun violence in this city. We understood that we did not stabilize our teacher workforce when we closed these schools. We laid off teachers, we laid off art teachers, but I think we also learned that we don't wait until we're in a financial crisis, where we had a superintendent who was faced with the numbers that he was in a financial crisis and had to urgently make decisions that face young people every day. I think we learned from that. And I will say we are doing a better job. I'm not going to say a perfect job, a better job at facilitating conversations and using a 10-year model when talking about the master's facilities plan in comparison to, at one point, it was 37 schools being considered in 2012, 2013. We ended up closing 23, 24 of them. So I think we started to learn from that experience, and we see the impact even today as people still talk about their neighborhood schools. We still drive down Germantown Avenue and see a vacant Germantown. We also understand that we have to be strategic. When we're closing schools, what's the plan with the building? We can't just close the school. What is the plan? Because all we are doing is showing a clear disinvestment in a neighborhood every time you close. So we learned a lot. Now we just have to see if it will be a better result this time around, because as Carly said, this is happening across the country. This is sadly not something we can avoid. It's just something that we can make sure we do right, or at least we're in church, so really close to right.
And just to underscore both of those points a little bit as well, like there are things, I've been to dozens and dozens of the school district's community engagement meetings about this, and there are things that the district has learned from that process that they've stated very clearly are undisputed, right? Like academic test scores for the kids who are displaced, whose schools were closed, went down. The test scores for the students at the schools that received those displaced students also went down. The financial savings that were projected from the 2013 closures did not materialize. And here we are again with a $300 million deficit. We did the thing the first time, we closed the schools, it didn't fix the deficit, and test scores and academic results went down. And so I think I will credit the school district with being the ones to open their presentations with that information, to say like, this obviously has very serious ramifications and trauma on communities and on the people who are impacted. It also affects our scores and our performance and our ability to learn. And so I think going forward, it at least seems like we're doing a better job of saying that part out loud. Whether or not we will grapple with that in a real way remains to be seen. But I'm heartened, at least from a transparency point of view, that we are at least acknowledging that that happened.
Part is important. And earlier a question was asked, was what did we learn from 2013? And I think transparency was a big thing. We have seen a lot of dialogue as it relates to certain schools. I'm so proud that Conwell is no longer on that list. If you know the original list, Conwell was on that list. And if you know the history of Conwell, can't close Conwell, right? Like that's, if you feel it, you understand that. So the dialogue exists, and you can see the modifications that's happened and how the original plan has changed. And I do think that that's important. I also think the sister raised an important point about the $1 billion that the city is sitting on. And I've seen some folks nod their head about the $1 billion. Let me just explain that part, right? So the city has a fund balance of about $1.2 billion. We also have what's called a rainy day fund. And the rainy day fund is sitting on close to about $400 million. The rainy day fund is what we use for COVID and emergencies and things like that. The $1.2 billion that we're sitting on, that's like your checking account, right? And so the concern is that with all of the uncertainty that's coming out of DC right now, and with our rainy day fund being so low, a decision by the president in the next 24 hours could bankrupt the city of Philadelphia. Now, I'm not saying that I agree with every suggestion and every recommendation that's happened as it relates to education funding, because in last year's budget, I screamed and hollered about this. I said big time, this is important. We need to address it now. And so the $1 billion is something that we could entertain, but just remember this, right? We're looking at addressing a structural deficit. This isn't a current emergency. The emergency becomes adamant if the Harrisburg doesn't pass a budget like they did last year, and we have to crack the glass. We did it with SEPTA, and we can do it with schools. That's when we'll tap into that $1.2 billion. The new tax that the mayor proposed would not go into effect until 2027. So again, this is about addressing a long-term structural deficit. So the $1 billion, you got options there. I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no. I'm not tipping my hand. I'm going to hold my tea on what I'm going to do and what I'm going to fight for. And I understand people who are paying attention to where we are fiscally, it's only natural that you will say, well, why wouldn't you just take it from the $1.2 billion you're sitting on? Or children are important, why wouldn't you tap into the rainy day fund? Between the uncertainty in DC and the fact that the emergency isn't current, That's why we're not tapping into that. What the mayor is saying, I'm trying to provide a structural solution to something that's coming down the horizon, and the tax that is being introduced would start in 2027, right? Which means we wouldn't really collect that revenue and see it until the 2027, 2028 school district. So I just wanted to provide clarity around that.
Thank you, Councilman. All right, our next question. Every Voice, Every Vote research also showed 81% of residents prioritize improving teacher pay and staffing, with many participants saying stronger compensation and support systems are key to retaining educators. How do closure conversations intersect with the teacher workforce, both in terms of retention and morale? And this is for Tamir and Naya. Naya? Nia?
No, you got it. You got it.
Okay, so again, as the most impacted, I'm heard. Good. And I'm going to say this because this is an important word that people should learn how to use when talking to their government officials, when talking to nonprofit organizations, explaining that you are the most impacted. So as the most impacted myself, I watch my teachers, especially the most radicalized teachers, get displaced. I watch teachers be underpaid. I've watched the systemic targeting of teachers, and I'm coming not from this whole like budget space, you know, because I know a true passionate teacher does not have to be paid a certain amount to teach. And I also know that the system in which teachers are brought into inner cities is not the most clean system that, again, considers the most impacted and considers community members as the teachers within their own community. But I watched teachers systemically get targeted. I watched how they were systemically pushed around the city and not allowed to teach at schools that would benefit the people, the predominantly Black, poor city that this is. And I hope I'm understanding that question correctly, because if I'm not, please feel free to. Okay, cool. I was radicalized in my high school by my teachers. I was the kid who, like I was explained earlier, most of my AP courses, my classes were full of functioning illiterate people who they ground each other up at the end of the school more than they read the books. And I argued with my teachers to not do second drafts because they were trying to force me to be the tokenized version of a student that they would not participate with the rest of the students in. Those teachers were supported and lifted up, while the teachers who radicalized me, and I utilized those classrooms as my safe spaces, they weren't put into the conversation. They were actually taken out of the conversation about how they would be affected and how their students would be affected. And then they weren't able to continue in education. I don't believe that Philadelphia has the intention to educate its citizens. I don't believe that the intention of the Philadelphia government is to make sure that the Black people who built the city, the brown people, and the indigenous people who built the city, they don't have the intention of educating them. They do not have the intention of making sure they are literate, and they have the complete intention of creating a working class, a working illiterate slave class. When you see schools like Parkway Northwest, which all the Germantown kids wanted to go to if they were smart, they're like, oh, so too bad we got put in the feeder school, we couldn't get in, and we didn't get those teachers. So that's what I think. I think that the teachers are being systemically targeted. I think that education is not being pushed to the forefront with teachers. I think that teachers are being brought in from other places that don't understand what's going on here and don't understand what happened 10 years ago. And that's all.
Wow. That was deep. I'm gonna root my answer kind of in data here. Philadelphia has roughly 47% of teacher vacancies in the Commonwealth, while we only make up about 10% of the teacher workforce in the Commonwealth. So we only make up 10%, but we have a 47% teacher vacancy. So I think I'm going to push the question not to just talk about retention and morale, but also recruitment of highly qualified teachers. I think we're going to see when we are closing schools, it makes a new teacher that's jumping into the workforce say, hey, do I want to go join the school district of Philadelphia because can I be next? Can my school be next? A simple question. And no teacher in their early tenure want to go to a school that can possibly be closed within that time frame. I think we also understand that, and Research for Action did a research report looking at Chicago and Philadelphia, and we understand when we close schools that affects majority Black teachers historically. So we're also going to see, we really only got 2% of the nation's public school teachers being Black male. I think we're at about 4.7, 5.1% in the school district of Philadelphia, which we're higher than national average. We will constantly see that decrease as we close schools. As for the teachers in the room, the site selection open or closed already? Are we in that phase of the school year yet? It closed already for teachers. So site selection is where a teacher gets to determine if they are jumping ship or staying in that school building. While we have a 10-year plan, I would be interested in seeing, I'm going to lean to the Children's First because they releasing all the research, and Elevate 215 ain't here, so I won't call them out, but I would be interested in seeing if we see a higher increase of teachers deciding to site select out of their building if their school is on the closure list, which then will shake the foundation of the school that's supposed to stay open for all of these years, but in reality, you can't keep them. And I know the superintendent is saying he's going to give a stipend, but that stipend ain't helping recruit teachers in the schools that need teachers most, and we have that same stipend in the PFT contract now. So we will struggle to retain, recruit, and morale will go down as we decide what schools will close. I'm almost comfortable confidently saying that. And it's not going to get better. But we also have to be okay with is riding the storm and doing strategic targeted investments, because we have to make this hard decision. How do we get folks that are born and raised in Philly? I know everybody like to say the emergency certification ain't the best thing, but this black boy from Southwest Philly was on emergency certification, teaching 8th grade English and grazed test scores by 20%. So emergency certification is when you may have not went to school to study to be a teacher, but you are committed and invested in being a teacher. So you got to get an emergency cert while you go on to get your next degree in order to be a certified teacher. We may see more of that, but how do we start to invest in those teachers? And the teachers people that are like, hey, I'm thinking about being a teacher. We start to pull them in so we can stabilize recruitment. We'll hopefully build morale and bring some excitement back in the school district of Philadelphia. And then our veteran teachers will be happy to mentor some of our younger teachers.
Thank you so much. We just got 2 more questions. 73% of residents identified improving school building conditions as a major priority, and focus group participants specifically raised concerns about aging infrastructure, asbestos, and lack of air conditioning. How should we think about school facilities in this moment, particularly when building conditions are both a concern and a factor in closure decisions? And this is for Councilman Thomas and Carly.
Sure. How should we think about our buildings? I think the one thing that also we haven't really mentioned here yet, but I think needs to be said, is the district's facilities plan is not just a closure plan. There's also a list of all sorts of modernizations and renovations, but there's a price tag on all of it, and it's a big if, right? Like it's a, 2.8, 1.8, I think it's $2.8 billion plan to not only close some schools, but to, modernize the bathrooms at Palumbo, to do all sorts of necessary expansions and renovations for other schools. But that is a big if, right? Like, I think we are situated in this moment where we can really come together and say, how do we envision a school district that serves everyone in the way that we need it to serve everyone, especially our most impacted students and residents? I keep thinking, as a reporter, I'm gonna say, I was kind and said we were being transparent before. I think we should be more transparent. I think we need a lot of radical transparency. I keep being brought back to, I grew up in New Jersey, and in high school, we had a teacher who was sort of infamous for doing this exercise with students where he would bring in his paycheck and bring in all of his bills and his expenses for the month. And he would lay it all down in front of us and say, make it work. You look at my paycheck, you look at my bills, you tell me, how are we gonna make this happen with the money that we have? And that kind of really honest transparency made us as kids be like, oh man, okay, so maybe if we put $10 away, we can take the trip, but then we can't eat out, but then what if our roof caves in? But if we put off the roof repair, then we're gonna get leaks, and that's gonna be more money down the line. So all of that to say, I think we need to be radically honest and transparent with each other, and that's coming from the district, from the city, from the state, from us as impacted folks as well, to say, here is our problem, here is what we have to solve it. What do we do? What do we want this system to look like? How do we want this system to function? And how do we do that with the money that we have, while at the same time pushing our folks in charge to say, whoa, we need radically more money if we really want the system to be what we want it to be. We're gonna need X amount of dollars to make that happen. So I think those things have to happen simultaneously. We have to be willing to acknowledge where we're at and what we can do with what we have, while also saying, if we had more, X, Y, and Z, our district could look like this. It could educate these kids in this way. It could expand algebra to everyone. So I'm with everyone on those points.
In the spirit of radical transparency, let me tell you exactly what I'm thinking when it comes to this facilities conversation. So I think first and foremost, again, the fact that we didn't close any comprehensive neighborhood high schools was a plus, right? When we think about some of the consolidation of schools, I think there are certain things that's a non-starter. Somebody mentioned Parkway Northwest up here. I don't think it's a good idea to allow Parkway Northwest to go into Martin Luther King High School. I don't think it's a good idea to touch Parkway West. I don't think it's a good idea to consolidate Lincoln Hall with Saul. Agriculture and farming are very different. So just because they're all outside doesn't mean it necessarily goes together. And the young people at Lincoln Hall will tell you that very emphatically. And so while we look at some of the success stories that we have as it relates to our special admission schools, I don't necessarily think sacrificing their success to address issues as it relates to buildings underutilized is the formula to success. And you've heard a lot of people up here, whether it was personal narratives, data, or other different facts, talk about why that's probably not necessarily ideal. We also have to think about the middle school model. I don't really know. I don't know, y'all. I'm being all the way honest, right? Like, I'm lost when it comes to the middle school model. On the one hand, I'm a graduate of Conwell Middle School, and I think about what the middle school model meant for us growing up. And then on the other hand, I'm listening to the data and the studies that say K-8 models is the new thing. And you just get confused because it's like, again, Robin Cooper, her voice is always in my head when it comes to this stuff. She'll talk about the fact that an 8th grade kitchen is totally different than a kindergarten kitchen, right? And that 7th grade student shouldn't be walking the halls with that 1st grade student. So it's tough to really examine what they're saying around the data with the middle school model, and Tamir is better than that than I am, compared to people who are teachers, right? I'm a teacher at my core. And so for me as a teacher, as a dean, as a former administrator, I just don't know. But then we got to think about other things. The shift in population is not something that enough people are talking about as it relates to this conversation. If you notice, there's no school closures in the Northeast. Why? Because there's been a shift of population in the Northeast. We've seen an increase in enrollment in all of our Northeast schools. All of our Northeast comprehensive neighborhood high schools are actually overpopulated. While you look at other parts of the city where we've seen a shift in population the opposite way, and we see a decrease as it relates to population in those schools. So that's not being discussed enough, right? And I hear Tamir, as it relates to families, that's a big part of it, because he's right. Middle-class black folks are choosing to leave Philly. But middle-class white folks are doing the opposite. And so the sister talked about gentrification a little earlier. That drives population. And so population shifts should be considered when thinking about where you build new elementary schools. But most importantly, you can't look to displace people as well when you're thinking about closing schools. So these are some of the things I'm thinking about. Last but not least is transportation. If you don't know, the School District of Philadelphia spends more money on transportation than most large districts. Why? Because we have so many special admission schools and so many charter schools. And if you don't know, the district pays for transportation for everybody. All calls for all schools as it relates to transportation goes to the district directly. So if we're rethinking about the future of public education, we gotta consider the transportation costs, and we gotta consider what we can do to essentially lower that, because that gives us an opportunity to save a few dollars as it relates to our annual operating budget. Those are a few things that go through my mind when it comes to what I advocate for when I'm meeting with the district and the school board, what we're fighting for, and what I prioritize. Now, I can only speak for me. Every legislator is different. Some folks don't really see education as their thing. I respect that, because there are certain things that's not necessarily my area of expertise. And so I understand legislators who try to stay in their lane, also understand district council members who specifically want to focus on their district. But as a council member at large, as a former teacher, as a father whose son is in his schools, as the president of the Coaches Association for the Public League, right? I represent all schools, not just on city council, but in the space of athletics, through coaching and through sitting on the board of the PIAA. I have to close out by talking about extracurricular activities. And that's something that I also consider, because part of rethinking and reimagining where we go and what direction we go in as it relates to public education has to be what we do as it relates to sports. Philadelphia School District spends some of the least amount of dollars per pupil as it relates to extracurricular activities, sports, athletics, debate, and any other option that young people have to put them in a position to not just stay out of trouble, but hopefully get a couple dollars for higher academia. I could probably talk for another 15 minutes about this, just this alone. But in a spirit of full transparency and what was said earlier, I do recommend that people reach out to your elected officials and ask them what their priorities are, but the most important the most important body as it relates to this particular topic is the school board. The school board, which is appointed by the mayor and approved by city council, has all of the power when it comes to what direction we go in. We have a bully pulpit, but to be honest, so do you.
Okay, and that's the perfect segue, actually, into our last question for everyone to respond. And you want to chime in again? I don't know. It's up to you. A major goal of this conversation is ensuring residents understand where their voice matters in this process. What can community members do right now to ensure their perspectives are heard and that decisions about schools reflect their neighborhood needs? What is one action Philadelphia must take now to ensure we are not having the same conversation again in the next 10 years? This is for everybody, so you guys can just choose who goes.
Thank you. So I think a few things. I think we talked a lot today about the problem in a lot of different ways, whether it's through data, whether they're human-centered. And so we're in this church, right? And I think the School District of Philadelphia is really asking the city to walk by faith in this school closures process. And I would argue that the layers of distrust that people have had to endure over the last few decades, and I come from this city, I grew up in West Philly, I went to public schools. People have to see the detail. I think the district needs to be pushed on more detail. And just like Councilmember Thomas said, the school board is another arena that everybody can be in. They have meetings monthly, Thursday at 440 North Broad Street, which is now named Constantine Clayton Educational Center. You should be going there and hearing exactly what is actually being on the docket and making sure that your voice is heard. You can sign up for public comment by Monday at 4 o'clock a few days before. Also, City Council has live sessions, and also Harrisburg also, you can look at that too. So I think there's a few things, but a lot of us don't actually know who our elected officials are. All of you have a city council person that is your direct person in your district. I don't know how many of you know who that person is. And I would encourage you, if you don't know who that person is, you need to find out tonight by Googling and putting in your address. The other piece is we have a primary coming up too. We need to be voting in all the things. So I think this thing is not just a matter of showing up at one thing. It's a matter of showing up in a very localized way. And there's a lot of arenas for us to do that. And there's a lot of ways to put pressure on folks. I do want to name that if school closures do persist, we need to be making sure, like Naya said, talking about the most impacted. And when I think about the most impacted of students, I'm thinking about the families who do not have another option to go to and may not want to send their child at the proposed school. So I think that they should have priority access in the school selection process. Another thing, students with IEPs and IFSPs, a transition for them is going to be super disruptive. Super disruptive. They need to have individualized transitions plans by the Office of Diverse Learners. We also need a 24-hour help desk. For people who can't go down to 440 or can't get somebody on the phone, they need that. These are all things we already pushed forward to the district. We need pressure from you all to say that there's more that needs to be done, and perhaps you all have different ideas. The other piece is mental health. When you insert different groups of people into a climate without proper staff, you're asking for a disaster. So we need more push and supports. And the district has a fabulous STEP program, but that also needs funding. So when we're talking about structural deficit, we're not just talking about money, we're talking about counselors not being there. We're talking, when you said 40% in teacher vacancies in Philadelphia, Superintendent Wallington was talking about substitute teachers gotta go. What happens when there's not enough teachers in school? School runs amok. So all these things, from the data to the human center, it's all connected. So begin to ask those questions, know who your folks are, the elected officials, and put pressure on them today.
I would like to add that if they don't listen, Philadelphia has housing rights because we're one of the most gully East Coast major cities ever, you know? Make them listen to you. Make them listen to you. There is no reason that as a city of citizens, we are truly a city of citizens. We are the pivot, like we are the cornerstone of the American existence. Make them listen to you. We got our housing. The reason why so many of us know people who own a house is because people in North Philly and West Philly broke windows and said, I live here. Always remember that not only do you live here, most of us have been here for generations. This is your city. This is not their city. These people are new. You do not know them. This is your grandmother's city, your great-grandmother's city. And you need to force the people who are here to serve you, the police. Everyone is here to serve you. Force them to listen to you. And if they don't, if they take your school, educate yourself. And if they take your building, burn it down. There you go. No, I'm not.
Don't pass it to me.
Yeah. And I said it. And I said it.
Anybody else want to share?
I was going to say read the news, which... No, I just want to back everyone up by saying, like, yes, reach out to your civic leaders. Yes, put pressure on your school district. Yes, attend school board meetings. If you need a reminder, we have a free texting service. We'll text you when your board meeting is coming up in case you forget. We want to see you out there. But I think if we're looking at immediate things you can do that might be in reach too, get in touch with your neighborhood school. Are they hosting a fundraiser? Donate if you can. Spend some time, volunteer. Get to know your community school and the people who teach there and serve there and work there. Because I think what we're seeing throughout this closure process too is like the schools with the strongest, loudest communities are getting a lot of attention from our elected officials. The ones that have been fractured are not necessarily receiving the same kind of attention. So what I'm saying is if you're looking for something immediate that is not necessarily dealing with government, if that's something that you're not comfortable doing, reach out to your school, talk to your principal, see if there's something you can do locally right by your house.
So I think they said everything you can say in summary, mobilize, right? If you mobilize in your neighborhood, in your school, you run for office, you put pressure on your elected officials. We have an election almost every year. State reps run nearly every year. You got an election twice a year. If you go out and vote, right, that is just one piece of this pie. But if you mobilize in your neighborhood, you can run for committee person and then decide who your ward leader, and your ward leader then decide who the person is that more than likely will be elected. Philadelphia is a ward city and a union town. When you start to push in and mobilize. I think I'm going to zoom in, though, on what thing we have to do so that we ain't had this conversation 10 years from now. I think we got to do that population study, as the council member said, right? And I know the superintendent has said that his research office has done some research on this. What we are experiencing is white flight. White folks now want to come back into the city. Black folks like, are we going to go back to the burbs? In 5 to 10 years, we're going to be coming right back here. It's just a population. We play double dutch, going back and forth, back and forth. So 10 years from now, we may not be having this school closure problem. We're going to have the Northeast problem. We don't have enough schools because we closed all the schools in the black neighborhoods that now the black folks are moving back into. And then we're going to say, Councilman, we ain't got no money to build these schools. So we're going to need another $1 billion bond, even though we still pay off the $1 billion bond from 10 years ago. And then we might be going bankrupt and we're going to be coming back with a state takeover. Just saying. So until we start to say, what is the population shift Also, when do we start saying, how do we make Philadelphia an appealing city for teachers, principals, and superintendents? I don't know how much longer Watlington is going to take the smoke from the city of Philadelphia. He's a Southern boy. He don't like the city smoke. But we have a hard time recruiting quality, highly trained, urban experienced superintendents. So if we don't start talking about how we make Philadelphia appealing, a $350,000 salary, that's cool. That's cool. But you got to make people want to really come to Philadelphia and serve as superintendent of what the 8th largest school district in the country. It's not appealing. So we have to change that. And I may say something controversial, and this is not in my official capacity, but we need to reimagine what the school board looks like. A fully appointed school board is not a school board that you can hold accountable.
And if I could add to that, they need to be paid. They need to be a paid position with salary and benefits, right? And that's important because if you think about it from a fundamental perspective, it's very difficult for a person living in poverty to serve on a school district, school board. So it is created this elitism, and I'm not like talking about people on a school board. I know those folks, so I'm not like individually, you got it? I'm not like individualizing anything, but the institution itself, right? It fundamentally has to happen because it's difficult to live in poverty and a volunteer. What, 30 hours a week or something like that? That's a very difficult ask. It is, so that's why they should be compensated. We talked a lot about Germantown tonight, and I appreciate the experience of folks who went through all those different initiatives, and I appreciate you being vulnerable for sharing your experience. I think about my friend, Rep. Andre Carroll, who also went to Germantown as well, too. And, you know, for where we are right now, you know, I was a teacher when that happened, and I think about what can we do to not get back to that moment. You know, I think that for a lot of us who's in position to advocate for this stuff, I know for me, you know, I ran for office because of this issue. When I ran for office for the first time in 2011, I was 25 years old, and you know, everybody was talking about things like drop, and my whole platform was about public education. And every race I lost before I was elected, my focal point was public education. And since becoming elected, my focal point is public education. So for me, I recognize that this is a legacy moment. The decision that we make today will be my legacy. No one's going to care about drive inequality. No one's going to care about things we did for quality of life. No one's going to care what we did with prison prison oversight, right? Because the people who got it wrong with Germantown High School, that's all we talk about, is that they got it wrong with Germantown High School. So the way for me to avoid coming back to this moment 10 years from now is to be laser sharp focused on all the things I talked about earlier that we're prioritizing and recognizing that this is about our legacy. We know that. We are 100% sure that the decision that we make will impact the future of Philadelphia, and everyone will, no matter what good or bad we do, everyone will remember that we were the people in charge when we either save, well, if we save them, ain't nobody gonna remember that. That's the truth. But if we close them, we'll never forget that. And that's the reality of it. Because when you save stuff, right, we still got more work to do. That's just like morally right? It's morally right to save Conwell. It's morally right to save some of these schools. But when you close stuff and you ruin people's lives, nobody forgets that. And nobody should. So that's my answer to how we not get back to this moment, is to focus on the fact that this is a legacy moment. Think about all those things I listed earlier and recognize that we have to get it right. We're not under the financial crisis that we were in the past, which means we have time. We don't have to rush the decision. We don't have to make a decision in March or April or even May. That's just not where we are. So that's my commitment to you, and you got my word that I'll fight tooth and nail to make sure that we do our best to get this right.
Well, thank you for the conversation, and now we're going to have Q&A time hosted by Jared Council.
How's it going, everybody? Yeah, I'm Jared Council, editorial lead and project manager at Every Voice, Every Vote. Thanks to our panelists for a very real and raw conversation about an important issue. We're going to open the floor for some questions. We're going to take 3, and I just ask that you please keep it to a question. I know you probably have a lot on your mind and you want to get a lot off your chest, but keep it short and precise so that we can have our panelists weigh in. Let me give you the mic.
When he spoke about the $1 billion rainy day fund, I would think it would be, I'm questioning, wouldn't it be imperative to spend that money, the $100 million a year for 10 years and then refund it as you can? Because education, I think, would be the most important thing to do, because I think an educated kid, it saves in the future with violence and criminal behavior if the more educated a person is. So wouldn't it be more imperative to use that $100 million a year to help fund the budget than to worry about it later?
I'm not saying you're wrong, right? I haven't, again, I'm keeping my powder dry as it relates to my position and what I'm going to recommend, because I am going to communicate what I think we should do as it relates to the moment that we're in. But the $1 billion that we're sitting on, right, like that's not, don't think of it as, well, we could earmark $100 million a year for 10 years, and then that will wipe the $1 billion down. The $1 billion that we're sitting on is not the rainy day fund. That's like your checking account. We got $1 billion in a checking account. And the rainy day fund, which is like the savings account, that's about $400 million if we pass the budget as is. You don't touch the rainy day fund unless it's COVID, right? Like that's the type of things you touch the rainy day fund. You can't touch it for nothing else, right? So if you look in the past and what we've done, if we didn't have money in the rainy day fund when COVID hit, y'all, Philly would have been the worst. We would have been in a way worse situation. So we can entertain the $1 billion, and we can increase even more the amount of money that the city gives to the district. That's an option, but you're going to have to cut something. You're going to have to identify something that you're going to say, okay, well, we won't give money to, and it's not, I'm not saying like lay off trash workers or not do pothole programs or something like that. We have a lot of special initiatives in the city that are choices, right? So you could do it from a fiscal perspective. You could do it, but the money is, you're going to have to take money from somewhere else. So from a budget perspective, you can't say, okay, I'm sitting on $1 billion, $100 million go to the school district every year. You could do it. No, you wouldn't get reimbursed, but that doesn't mean your idea is a bad idea. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm saying you could do it, right? And I didn't say what you said. You said put up some money right now in order to make sure that, and then replenish it. But you could do it, but it wouldn't necessarily address the structural damage, right? It would be a Band-Aid.
Yeah. All right, we're going to move to the next question.
Y'all see where I get it from?
Good evening, panelists. I have a question. I think that I forget the brother that's sitting next to Councilman Isaiah Thomas, but I mean anybody can answer this question. But I'm really curious to answer this question as it relates to the brand of the Philadelphia School District about educating children. Is the reason why families and parents either leave the city that are having children because they want their children educated, but the brand is not a brand that they want to place their faith in of their children. And that flight is about 40,000 families, or 40,000 individuals that had children left the city, not counting the other families that consider wanting to move to Philadelphia but decide not to because of the education system.
So, Ms. Falar, that's a tough question. Because I would say in summary, yeah, people don't want to send their kids to a district who has not proved themselves generation after generation after generation. respectfully, and I got a lot of love for my frat brother, Dr. Watlington, Philadelphia is not the fastest growing urban school district in the country. You wanna know why? Let me tell you why. NAEP scores, tell me what we're looking at actual on the day-to-day. NAEP is great, but NAEP is that's a test that we examine. That's a flawed actual measurement of fastest growing. But I'll even say basically, until Philadelphians feel like we are the fastest growing urban school district with academics, it doesn't matter. Until we every day say, I send my child to a high quality, great public school. I don't care what data you quote about the top 10 schools in the city of Philadelphia. Until you can say the 19142, 19143, 19138, and et cetera experience that high quality school, we're just at the same place that we are. And listen, as I grow older, I gotta decide, am I gonna send my kids to the school and take the chance to say, hey, can they get into a Penn Alexander even though you gotta know somebody to get in Penn Alexander? Or do I not jeopardize my child's future and send them to the school that I know that's gonna educate them, and that's the private school up the street? Because why does my black child gotta continue to be disenfranchised by the system that continues to do it for generations? So it's a tough question, and it's a tough answer, but don't nobody want to send their kids right now. That's the sad part.
All right.
Okay, so I don't know fully how this works, so let me know if it doesn't. But could you introduce a bill to defund the police and fund education?
Ask the question again.
Could you introduce a bill in City Council to defund the police and fund education?
You can. So let me talk about it from just a legislative perspective. In 2020, when George Floyd hit, that's when you've seen a lot of activity as it relates for people talking about police budgets. I'm a numbers guy. Economics, legislation, that's what I do. So we examined a lot of things, and what we found was that over 90% of the police budget is actually salaries, right? And so there are a lot of frivolous things that are paid for, that the city paid for police officers. And the reality is that most of those things are actually negotiated through collective bargaining in their contract. So legislatively, could I introduce a bill to possibly reduce maybe something that impacts their supplies, like what they use to do their jobs? I could, but it will probably be seen as significantly unpopular because I would be taking away a tactic from them and not necessarily impacting their overall budget. Remember, when you see that big number that their budget is like $1 billion, the majority of that, I think the exact number is 91%, but don't quote me on that. But over 90% of it is actual salaries. And so that's unfortunate because I'm of the position that I do think that we spend way too much money on police in our neighborhoods. I think we pay police, you're seeing it on a national level even more. I think what we're seeing is we pay police officers to do jobs that police officers doesn't necessarily have to do, and that in turn inflates the budget significantly. So when I think about traffic safety, when I think about some of the things that's needed for special events, right? Like some of those things can be given to other folks, and we tried to do that in the past. That's how you've seen crossing guards move from the FOP union to District Council 33, but then when you go talk to the crossing guards, who mostly black and brown folks who look like you and me, they are upset. They saying, I want to be in 33. I want to go back to the FOP. So when we try to do things, we often get stuck between a rock and a hard place. But from a legislative perspective, we're very limited in what we can do as it relates to the police budget. I hope that answered your question.
All right. Thank you all so much. Let's give ourselves and our panelists a round of applause. This is not an easy conversation, and I truly thank you all for handling that with grace. Go to the next slide. So we're talking about youth here, right? And we're talking about investing in youth. So I am extremely passionate about youth, about education, and even here in my church. And so again, we was graciously thank Dr. Pastor Corey Johnson for hosting us here. And so I just wanted to take this time to return, that gratitude and invite you all to do so with me. We have an awesome youth ministries here. It's called Next. Our youth ministry leader is not here tonight because she's out with our youth. But I really want to, especially if you live in the area, we are looking for volunteers. We receive donations. We really, really do a lot. And so if you can support the youth that are impacted in this facility that you joined us in tonight, we would greatly, greatly appreciate that. And that's from me. That's not from him, I promise. And then lastly, right, the goal of these conversations always is education and information. And so before you leave, the one ask that I would ask you all to participate in is the post-panel polling. After you've left this conversation, do you feel more informed? Do you feel more inspired to become engaged? What did you learn? What would you like to see moving forward? And so that is our last ask to you all. There are still refreshments available, Ms. Burks? Yes, so if you came a little late and you missed out on our snacks, please feel free to hang out in our multi-purpose room for a little bit and grab some things. We don't want to take it home. And stay connected to us at Every Voice, Every Vote. We're on Instagram, Facebook. It's not called Twitter no more. That's my hesitancy. That LinkedIn. But again, we are here to make sure that you stay informed, make sure you have access to information and the resources to help you be informed in your decision when it comes to civic engagement. I want to also do a special thanks to our other partners, Tom and Angie from PA Youth Vote. Thank you so much for partnering with us on this. Of course, City of Philadelphia Council Member Isaiah Thomas, Shania Bennett, Carly from Chalkbeat. Because of PA Youth Vote, that's how we got our amazing panelists. Naya here this evening, thank you so much for your voice, your vulnerability, and your passion. And then, of course, Miss Inella Ray from Children First. And then someone near and dear to my heart, Tamir Harper. So thank you all. Again, their participation is how these conversations are able to happen. And again, thank you all for showing up. And with that, we are officially adjourning. Have a great evening.